Here in Key West, we were out before it was in. In this open and inclusive paradise, you can be yourself, make new friends, and savor our live and let live vibe. With LGBTQ plus friendly accommodations, our legendary nightlife, and year-round activities and events, it's always a good time to come as you are. Key West, close to perfect, far from normal.
Welcome to this week's Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today with Trade Martin, Bob Marks, and Andy Cohen.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
Joining us this week for a special show is National Horsemen's Benevolent Protection Association CEO, Eric Hamelback. Eric, welcome to the Harness Racing Alumni Show.
Good morning, Fred. Thank you very much for having us on. Appreciate that.
I'm glad to have you. Eric, decoupling. It affects both thoroughbreds and standardbreds. What is the status of decoupling in Florida, and why was the national HBPA not there last week when the bill was passed in the Florida House?
Okay, great question. Thank you very much, Fred. So the first thing sometimes, and I've learned this recently, sometimes I like to explain a little bit on the decoupling aspect because, you know, there were people who called me, I guess the morning of January 7th and said, you know, we didn't think that was an issue because we thought horses with different owners could already run as separate entries at Gulfstream. So you see the confusion. Some people saw decoupling as one definition as opposed to what is the real definition that we're dealing with now, the real problematic issue, and that is the decoupling or separation of live racing mandated to have a gaming license. And so it's very important to understand, at least from my aspect, and I know from the USTA's aspect, you know, we look at casinos across the country and outside the states of Nevada and New Jersey, gaming didn't have a footprint until they coupled with horse racing. It didn't matter if it was harness or thoroughbred, and quite honestly, greyhound racing. So casinos used this coupling, gaming companies used this coupling to get a footprint in a state, right? So as we stand now, in the state of Florida, you guys probably remember a few years back, there was an initiative to decouple, and subsequently there was enough lobbying pressure that the decoupling that was passed actually decoupled harness racing and dog racing, and then thoroughbreds was carved out. So what's going on now, the status in Florida, is there an initiative from a gaming license holder, that being First Racing or the Stronach Group, to decouple, to no longer have a mandated number of live racing dates to maintain their gaming license. So why weren't we there? Great question. At the end of the day, that was a committee hearing. We pretty much had the intel that the committee had already planned to pass it. There wasn't that many opportunities to speak, and we did have the Tampa Bay HBPA, actually Vice President Jan Meehan spoke along with the partners that we are fighting this with, the FTBOA's Lonnie Powell.
Okay. Eric, why would a racetrack owner, well, First Racing, Stronach, initiate legislation for decoupling?
Well, I think in this day and age, that's a hard question to really answer, Fred. It's a choice, right? I think if you look at it from a couple of different avenues, what I believe, and this is speculation, what I believe that the Stronach Group is trying to accomplish is to sell the property. They want to sell the property, and they think or they believe that being uncoupled from racing would give it a better opportunity to be sold to a gaming company. Now, that's their belief. You know, again, I haven't spoken to them directly, but I'm speculating. But I also would say I strongly disagree. If you look at Caesars in particular, Penn Gaming in particular, there are plenty of gaming companies that are flourishing in the industry that also are coupled with horse racing. Quite frankly, you can look at Churchill Downs Incorporated. Many people would say that they're a gaming company now, but also one of the most successful owners of racetracks. So I don't believe necessarily that's the reason why, but I believe that's the reason that they are trying to use to explain why they want to decouple.
Well, how would decoupling affect the purses in horse racing?
I'm sorry, say that. It broke up a little bit.
How would decoupling affect the purses in horse racing?
Well, in essence, what it would do is it would take any gaming revenue that was generated from on site that would normally go into purses, that would again be decoupled or no longer necessary. So again, if you think way back to the mid-'90s when coupling began, I most remember the state of West Virginia. I was still working for Frank Stronach, for Adena Springs at the time, and I remember when that state in particular coupled. And so, while a lot of people want to throw out the word subsidy, I strongly am offended by that term, because what gaming companies are doing now is they're paying a tariff, right? Tariffs are all over the news these days, but they came into a state where they did not have the right to be, but partnering up with horse racing, they were allowed to build their casinos, open up businesses, but in doing so, you had to pay something back to racing. Because look, nobody's going to ever dispute the fact that horse racing is entertainment. I try to make sure people understand horse racing is a form of entertainment, no different than the Super Bowl that we saw last night. So it's dependent upon expendable income. So when you put a casino right at a racetrack, are you going to lose some customers? Possibly so. More likely than not, you will. So here's the tax. Here's what you're going to pay in partnership to be here with us. Now, fast forward to 2025, gaming companies want to do away with that tariff. They don't believe they need to be taxed anymore. They want to stand on their own, so to speak. Well, then, if that's the case, I believe their gaming licenses should be stripped, because they weren't in the state to begin with unless it wasn't for us.
Correct. How devastating could it be for the horse racing industry if other states start to follow the suit of Florida?
Well, I'm really glad you asked me that, because a lot of people kind of early on, and so I'm talking about January 8th and 9th, after that initial press release came out, I was the first person who put out a statement very quickly on January 7th, because I don't believe that there's any doubt from a precedential standpoint if other states, say other gaming companies, let's pick Texas for an example, or Louisiana, if companies in those states, gaming companies in those states, see what's going on in Florida, and let's say it's successful, why would they not want to try it? So I believe very wholeheartedly it is in the best interest of the national HBPA and other alphabet soups in our industry to push back on decoupling. And I say the same for harness racing. My good friend Mike Tanner, he put out a statement, I believe, that coupled, let's use that word, in agreement with our statement that they're also strongly opposing any further efforts to decouple.
Eric, what should horsemen and horsewomen be doing to fight against decoupling? What can they do?
Contact your legislatures. I mean, we are still in the process of collecting signatures from our petition, which we're about 1,700 names, and and that's from across the country, right? Because I do believe from a precedential standpoint, it's important for everybody in the country to show Florida that nobody wants this. Nobody. But in the state of Florida, and we'll be launching a campaign relatively soon, you need to now contact your senators. You know, we believe that the House is going to, quote unquote, pass the bill, but now we're looking at the Senate bill, which will come up relatively soon. We need everybody in the state of Florida to contact the Senate and say we do not want our state decoupled from horse racing.
Okay. Add the Harness Racing Alumni to that list. You can definitely do that. And we're definitely there. And is there anything that can be done on the Washington, D.C. level to fight against decoupling?
No. I would actually expand a little bit on that because, you know, we are certainly well known for being in litigation right now with the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. I'm a firm believer that the federal government doesn't need to be telling the states what to do. And in fact, that's Amendment 7 in the Constitution. So in this point, I would stick to my guns and say federal intervention to or not to decouple is not the right of the federal government. That is a states' rights opinion.
Okay. Hey, Trey, did you want to add anything in here?
Yeah, well, I guess the decoupling would substantially lower the purses at a racetrack. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well,
there's no question about that.
Yeah, that's the important thing, really. You know,
it really is. I mean, it really is. And again, not to be defined as a subsidy, but to be defined as a tax and assistance and an allowance to be even in the state. That's the price for us allowing you to come in.
Okay, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. This is great. I appreciate the opportunity on a national level to explain decoupling and certainly to talk about our efforts to stop that.
Now over to Andy for this week's Keeping Pace Weekly Update.
Thanks, Fred. I think I'm going to focus again this coming week in the Keeping Pace column at Pollock Report on the idea of a commissioner and whether it's feasible, whether it's harness racing or thoroughbred racing. I've had a couple of exchanges this week with Mike Rapoli, the thoroughbred guy who calls himself the commish. I'm also going to be really interested to sort of absorb what your guest is talking about as it relates to the federal racing integrity law, its application in thoroughbred racing, and obviously in standardbred racing as well. That's it, Freddie. Back to you.
Thank you, Andy. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks for listening, and please join us again next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show.